All right. Hi, everyone. I'm My name's Julie Burke. I am the owner and therapist of Violet Crown Therapy, and so I'm super excited to be doing this on talking about gender nonconforming teens. I have a presentation. I figured it would be easier to kind of share that information with y'all in that capacity. Feel free throughout it to whether you ask questions directly, if you message questions, whatever feels best for you. Like, it's definitely something I'm open to any of that with. But what I am going to do is share my screen with y'all, excuse me, to get started with that. Um, and I will talk about what made me choose the thing to come with it. So give me just a second. So something that I have done for many years, excuse me, Zoom is tricky. There we go. I'm with working with gender nonconforming teens. This is something that I've done for many years. It's something I feel really passionate about. It is a vulnerable population that I think needs a lot of support, and especially during Suicide Prevention Month, I think just especially just kind of knowing like some of the supports that these people may need um is just important to kind of just kind of talk about like different supports, what this looks like, what you can do to support people, and then also or the teens in your life or even adults in your life, and also just some resources for y'all. So just to kind of get started, um I wanted to start with just kind of talking about like what gender nonconforming means. I think this is something that is talked about in some capacities, but not a lot. And so I think it can be difficult at best to kind of know exactly what that means. Um, and really and truly, it's anything that when someone's gender expression doesn't match the norms of masculine and feminine, whatever that looks like. It's just basically people when they don't adhere to stereotypical gender roles. And that might look like a couple of things. It might include someone's clothing, their hair, their makeup, personal hygiene, kind of anything like that. I have this later on in the presentation, but it also could have, it could include someone's name. It includes, the pronouns that they use. There's a lot of different aspects that go into I mean, really and truly, it's about identity. So there's so many different things that go into a kid's identity, and especially like as a teenager, as a tween, teen, anything like that, there's so much influence and so much trying to figure out who I am. And a lot of times people, they might try on different identities in some capacities. They might not, they might, be solid in who they are, but it's also like that's a lot of pressure for teens to have. Something to keep in mind within this, gender nonconformity is not related to sexual orientation. It can Someone who is gender nonconforming might have a different, a non, I guess, non-traditional or non-expected sexual orientation, excuse me, but that certainly is not the case. Doesn't mean that it has to be. Um, and so with thinking about this, with thinking about what what it means in terms of gender nonconforming, I only gave y'all a few examples. There's so many aspects of a person's identity and what goes into it. And so I don't necessarily want to focus too much on that. Rather, I want to focus, and we'll get there in a second, of like what support looks like. So something that I want to be mindful of um is we live in a society that is very black and white. It's either boy girl, it is blue or pink. It's very much this is your girly or your masculine. It's very binary, and much of life is not black and white like that. It's not a binary thing. And so trying your best to kind of like recognize your own biases as far as like gender norms and gender roles go is going to be really helpful when supporting gender nonconforming youth. We all have our own internalized biases. It is, I do too. Like that's kind of like it is what it is. But the more you recognize it and the more you try to disentangle it, the more you're going to recognize, okay, what am I like, how much of this is like internalized, like heteronormative beliefs, and how much of this is like how like just kind of just like a need of mine. Like and just kind of recognizing that can certainly support different youth in your life. And then also gender expression changes. It's one of those things, whether it's something that it's like gender nonconformity, like, I think it's important and helpful to think about like perhaps what different identities, maybe like as this, as an adolescent, what y'all went through, if you kind of tried to change things in some capacity, if you didn't. Obviously things change, people's needs change, but like for me, for example, in middle school, I went through a very, very quick 2-week phase of like trying black lipstick. Was not my thing. And even though that's not gender non-conforming, it was kind of like a way, like, okay, let me play around with makeup. Let me see what looks good for me and like what feels good. And so whether it is, makeup or clothing or hairstyles, any of that, like just give space for it. Can be easier said than done, and also so important to do. So, and again, I can't say this enough. Anything in terms of gender nonconformity, it's just something that it doesn't match the gender norms. Um, and people's, and we're going to talk about different like gender identities on the next slide, just to kind of lay it out there. But if someone who is trans, they might be gender nonconforming, but even then, not all trans people are. And so it's also not just limited to one distinct, like it's not just limited to two distinct things, masculine or feminine, boy or girl, or anything like that. And so I think that's also an important thing just to be like mindful of. These are not all of the gender identities that exist. If I were to do that, it would take up way more time than what we have here. And also, I don't necessarily want to spend our time focusing on this. Rather just kind of sharing information with y'all of like, okay, what are the words that we hear some of our kids saying, or students or friends, friends of our children, or things like that, of just to kind of have insight. And so just, I thought it was like just be helpful to go through this. So, and some of them have overlap, and like it's like that's okay. Just because there's overlap, someone might identify with one identity more than another. And even if it doesn't make sense to us, it's not our responsibility to assign that role to another person. But anyway, just to kind of go through some of these relatively quickly, um, transgender or trans is just kind of a general umbrella term for people whose gender identity differ from the sex they were assigned at birth. So again, trans can encompass multiple identities. Um, and and again, someone like, for example, agender or non-binary. So agender is someone who doesn't identify with any gender, whereas non-binary, it's, when people don't identify fully as male or female. And or sometimes they have days where they feel and are experiencing more of their male identity or more of their female identity, or more of like the agender aspect of it, where it's like they don't really feel anything. Um, Gender fluid and gender queer are also pretty similar. So like if you look at non-binary and gender fluid, I have the same definitions up there for them. And it's because like people who identify as either non-binary or gender fluid, again, might have this similar experiences by definition, yet something about one of those words just resonates with them more. Um, Gender queer is sometimes people again kind of feel like, oh, I feel I'm in like a masculine presenting body, but I like to wear makeup, but not in a way that I'm doing like drag necessarily, but it's just kind of like trying to figure out. But again, that per like traditional gender roles doesn't necessarily match, if you will. And then cisgender is a term for people whose gender identity aligns with their sex they were assigned at birth. And so I do also want to like name to y'all, um, just for transparency's sake, like I am a cis woman. I was, was born a woman. I identify as a woman. I am not trying to speak on behalf of all gender non-conforming people in any capacity. This is coming from a place um of a lot of experience. Oh, my slides are not changing. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry, y'all. Thank you for letting me know. Let me figure out what's going on. Um, I apologize. Okay. Hopefully, can someone tell me if they see quick it says all the things about the different gender identities? Yes, thank you so much for letting me know. I am so
Yes.
sorry, y'all. I appreciate it. Technology is not my best strong suit sometimes. So thank you for letting me know. If the next one doesn't change, please let me know. Also, I shared this presentation with Katie. I can also save it as a PDF and have her like send it to y'all to anyone who's interested, just to kind of have this information. Um, if it's helpful, especially because I have resources at the end. So again, with this next one, I also just want to point out that again, I'm talking about gender identity and biological sex, just to kind of name that like sex is the biological classification, usually assigned at birth. Gender identity is how someone like presents themselves and who they are. So a lot of times gender identity is like really at the core of like, who am I? Um, it's kind of like, how do I want the world to see me? How do I want to be perceived? So we're going to go over like the next parts of this are going to be ways to support gender nonconforming youth. And something I want to point out is this might be hard for some people in different capacities. It might feel and we'll get to this. It might feel confusing. It might be something you don't understand. And supporting I mean, supporting all youth depending on what their needs are, but especially like non-conforming youth, I think at its core is like such a way, it really is like it is suicide prevention. It is ways to support people. It's ways to say like, I see you and I love you regardless of who you are. Um and part of that, pronouns are a huge thing. Um, you know, growing up, it was always assumed, oh, I am Julie Burke. I look like a girl. I've got long hair. I'm girly. Therefore, I use she, her pronouns. The assumptions were correct. Like I do use she, her pronouns, and I was born with the name Julie. I still go by Julie. However, there's a lot of people who don't have that experience. And so I think either, trying to be intentional of like, hey, what pronouns do you use? What is your name? Do you have nicknames or a chosen name that you would like me to call you? And so something I wanted to also name, it's like, if or when someone changes their name or asks for different pronouns, and again, we'll get to this, I'm getting ahead of myself. You might mess up. That's part of this. It is okay. Um, but it's also just kind of like checking in with people. Like if someone says, if one of your kids is like, hey, like I don't think I really identify with this name anymore, or you know what, I think maybe I want to try out different pronouns. For some people, it might legitimately be, hey, let me try it out and see what happens. For some people, it might be like, oh my goodness, this is such a relief. Like I feel more like me, or literally anything in between. But it's the intentionality behind that like creates a lot of safety, and it's like, oh, like safety and trust, and like that's huge within this. um this is also huge. Don't shame or punish people. So when someone is exploring their gender, when someone's exploring their identity, do not assume that it's out of defiance. Do not assume it's out of rebellion. Um, Trying your best for curiosity, even if it's like, hey, like, I don't really understand. Can I ask questions? Or what is it like to tell me that? Or even telling somebody like, I don't know what to say, but thank you for telling me. Like that support is huge. And really and truly, I think teenagers have in so many capacities such a hard like such a like I mean really quite excuse me, really and truly like some pretty big challenges. And I think trying to explore identity and who they are and what that looks like um in non-traditional ways, like I don't think kids typically want to make their lives harder. And so it's like, in this, it's like if they're gonna rebel in some capacities, figuring out who they are and what their identity is probably isn't one of those ways. And just kind of reminding yourself of that. And also like recognizing like this doesn't have to do with me. Like if they are able to tell you, hey, like I need to talk to you. I think I'm exploring my identity and this is what's going on, that shows so much trust in you. It's really scary to say I don't really know who I am and I'm figuring it out. Um Also like within that it's okay to ask questions. I think questions are okay based on the intention. What do you need from me? What is this like for you? Um what can I do to support you? Anything like that. I think if it's coming from a place of shame, why are you doing this to me? Obviously, those are, I mean, the intention behind both of those questions or those examples are like wildly different. And so if you do have thoughts like that, one, that is okay. Like I want to normalize, like nobody's perfect. It can be jarring. And if you do have those kind of reactions, then I think looking for support on your own so you can one kind of sort through your biases and your needs and then know how to like authentically show up for your kid is going to be what's going to be best in that capacity. Um, but also in this, I think like asking permission to ask questions. Hey, can we sit down and talk? Is it okay if I have questions about this? And know if your teen says no, it's like, okay, I will honor and respect that. And I want to know how to support you. But making sure that it's coming from a place of like curiosity and like keeping your kid's dignity and not coming from a place of like a self-serving kind of shaming. I want you to take care of me way. Um, and then within that, acknowledge your mistakes. Um, People are human. We're bound to make mistakes. Within my practice, I work with many, gender non-conforming youth. Um, I used someone's former name recently and I caught myself and I was like, I am so sorry. I can't believe I just used your old name and we moved on. I didn't make it a big thing. Because then if you do, it's like, oh, I'm so sorry. How could I do this? What's going on? It's more about you and then your teen may be inclined to caretake you as opposed to, hey, I am acknowledging this. I'm gonna move on from it now. I'm because yeah, it's gonna happen. I think making mistakes is just by default part of being human. Or I guess rather the opposite, being human is whatever. Anyways, it's gonna happen is what I'm ultimately getting at. And this is a huge one too. Don't out anyone. So say if your kid has a friend over and you hear that, your kid using, I don't know, for example, they, them pronouns or a different name, reaching out to that kid's parent and being like, hey, like, I didn't know so and so is going by this name now. Their parents might not know that. Um, it kind of creates a little bit of a tricky territory because I'm not necessarily advocating to like keep secrets. And also, I think there's an element of like, if a kid's parents don't know, there might be a reason for that, and safety might be part of that. And so just be really careful in those capacities. Again, and even like, for example, like if your kids, if any of your children come out in any capacity as gender nonconforming, don't tell other family members. Um, that can be a conversation between you and your child of, hey, what would this look like to tell grandma, to tell your cousin? Do you want me to? Do you want to? What does that look like? And really just having it be a conversation as opposed to like taking the liberty of just being like, hey, well, I'm going to share this with the world. That's not necessarily yours to share unless asked to, of course. I'm so within that, like switching gears, of talking, and it's like the I would say that those supports that we just went over are important by default, but I also want to like to keep in mind of like a huge part of what I'm advocating for is this unconditional support, this unconditional curiosity, this I see you, I want to support you because I want to be really mindful. And this is all we're going to go over, quite frankly, in terms of discrimination that can happen. This is just at school. This can happen um in other places as well. I'm just school is typically where kids spend most of their time, but being called derogatory names. There's so much in the media and previously and also currently still of like what it's like in terms of like bathrooms and locker rooms, which obviously still creates challenges in a lot of ways. And even then, like, just a very quick example of what this might look like. I know someone who went to the gym who biologically, this person's sex is female. Their gender identity and expression is male. At a public gym, they were using the female locker room, but someone was like, oh, there's this person shouldn't be in here. And so like even that was really jarring. So like even when people are able to use it's like there's so much safety within locker rooms, whether it's like, okay, I should be in here, but I shouldn't be in that one. It's really hard. Unfortunately, physical and sexual assault, that kind of discrimination and assault can happen. Bullying, that can happen obviously in person, but especially with like phones and social media, so much cyberbullying and just access to people happens in this way. So we don't know, um, we don't know what our kids are experiencing, and they may not always tell us. And even if they do tell us, we may not always know how to support them. So having your home be a safe place, like the safest place of having that and getting to know your kid and seeing them is going to help create, more safety within this and like how can I support you? What does this look like? Because it's hard. It's really hard. And then switching gears, I just have two more slides of just different resources I wanted to share with y'all. Only one of these is local, the top one, Out Youth. So Out Youth is a wonderful organization. They have like drop-in community support on Wednesday evenings and Sunday evenings for tweens and teens. They have one for young adults on Thursdays. And they have counseling services, they have all kinds of support. The Trevor Project is a 24/7 crisis support. There's a lot of advocacy on there. There's a lot of just information of different people. I thought especially Suicide Prevention Month, this was especially important to share with y'all. PFLAG, I do not remember what it stands for entirely, but that's also a really great one with a lot of like education and advocate for anyone who identifies as LGBTQ plus. Um, I have the link. There was like a parenting tip sheet, and then Stand with Trans is also, so that's an organization that has virtual support groups, which I thought was really cool. So they have virtual support groups for parents for gender non-conforming people. They're all conducted on Zoom. There's so many of them. And just to even have that kind of access and that kind of community is huge. And with organizations that are doing good work. And then totally not an exhaustive list at all. Oh, I wanted to let y'all know, the top two are great for tweens and teens. Um, Trans Plus Love, Sex, Romance, and Being You. That's also a great resource for parents. But how to understand your gender. Gender's super confusing, and especially if people are unsure who they are and how they feel, it can be really just like feeling small of just not sure what to do. And then for parents, two of my favorite resources are Raising Them and The Gender Creative Child. If nothing else, just to kind of like educate yourselves on just what this looks like and what it means. Strangely enough, there's also some really, I say strangely enough, I've read a few young adult books about that have like queer main characters, and that has been really interesting to also just from a teenager's point of view in a book, but like to kind of have more insight of what they look like or what their life looks like and just some of the supports. Um, but that is kind of that is what I have in terms of this for y'all. And I'm curious, of course, if any of you have questions. There's no expectation for questions, but I'm here for any and all things. Like I said, whether you ask through the chat or verbally. Well, I will take that as there aren't any questions. What I will do is when I email the presentation to Katie, I will ask her to share it with y'all and also my contact information. Any of you can reach out with anything, anytime. I'm available and really appreciate y'all coming today. So I hope y'all have a great day.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Bye, y'all.